Two haunting accounts from opposite ends of the country, yet bound by the same bone-chilling thread. One, born in the misty shadows of Washington's towering evergreens. The other, taking shape in the brooding depths of Pennsylvania's ancient woodland. Each teller thought they knew the forest, that they'd heard every snap and growl that the wild could offer, until they came face to face with the unimaginable. Let's follow these two nightmarish trails into the unknown. Welcome to Weird Encounters, a place where the ordinary fades into shadow and the unexplainable comes alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and become part of our ever-growing community of the curious. Now prepare yourself, because what you are about to hear is not for the faint of heart. I finally decided I can't keep this bottled up. I'm originally from Spokane, Washington, so I've been camping and hiking around the Pacific Northwest my whole life. I thought I knew these forests. I thought I'd seen every type of wildlife you could imagine, like grizzlies in Glacier National Park and cougars prowling the outskirts of Coeur d'Alene. I even heard the distant call of wolves out near Okanogan. But I'm telling you, I have never experienced anything like what happened to me just last month in Mount Baker-Snoqualmie National Forest. I was up there around mid-October, technically off-season for most casual campers, but I like the quieter spots in the fall. The weather had been weirdly warm during the day but dropped to near freezing at night. I set up a small campsite near Baker Lake, thinking I'd do a bit of trout fishing the next morning. I'd arrived late in the afternoon, so by the time the tent was pitched, the sun was already dipping behind the pines. It was a Tuesday, October 18th to be exact, and there were hardly any other campers or hikers around. The ranger I bumped into on the way said something about a possible storm rolling in. Now, I want to mention something seemingly trivial, but it still unnerves me when I think about it. On my drive up to the trailhead, I passed an old man standing by his beat-up Ford truck on the side of the forest road. He was wearing this ratty flannel jacket, looked like he'd been out there for a while, and he waved me down. He never directly asked for help, he just sort of stared, and I couldn't make sense of his expression. He tilted his head like he was trying to hear a distant sound. When I rolled down my window to see if he was okay, he gestured vaguely up the road as if something was waiting for me. Then he just tapped the side of my car, walked off into the underbrush, and disappeared. I brushed it off as maybe he was just a local who liked messing with out-of-towners. But now I wonder if he was trying to warn me. That night, around 1 a.m., I woke up to the sound of heavy footsteps circling my tent. Not just scurrying like a raccoon or a deer, these were solid thuds, like a large man trudging around. I tried to convince myself it was just an elk or a black bear, but the cadence was wrong. It kept circling, then pausing for way too long, then circling again. At one point, there was this low humming or growling noise, almost mechanical, but mixed with a guttural animal sound. I must have laid there, paralyzed with fear, for a good hour. Around 2:30 a.m., I actually unzipped the tent flap a couple of inches to peek outside. I caught a glimpse of something tall and gaunt, maybe 7 feet, but I couldn't see it clearly. It moved in a flash of pale gray skin, no fur that I could discern. My flashlight was shaking so badly that the beam flickered all over the place, so I didn't get a good look. But I know it was standing on 2 legs, hunched, with elongated limbs. I don't know if you'd call it a crawler or something else entirely, but it was definitely nothing I'd seen in any field guide. When it noticed my flashlight, it let out this short, sharp exhale like air escaping from a broken pipe and darted into the tree line. Everything went dead silent. No crickets, no wind, no rustling leaves. I was too terrified to step out and check for tracks. I just zipped the tent closed and tried to keep from screaming. The next morning, I almost convinced myself it was just a vivid nightmare. But then I noticed a weird chemical-like smell around my campsite. It reminded me of ozone after lightning strikes, or maybe burnt electronics. My fishing line, which I'd left coiled by a rock, was scattered in a spiral pattern, like something had deliberately picked it up and laid it back down in circles. It was surreal. I still thought about packing up and leaving right then, but I'd promised myself at least 2 days of camping. The day was calm, no sign of that thing, so I forced myself to stay. Toward evening, I ran into a pair of hikers, brother and sister from Bellingham, who were on a day trip. They said they'd seen something strange along the trail. The sister told me she'd noticed footprints that looked human but were far too large and spaced in an odd stride. The brother said he spotted a pale figure darting behind a tree, only to vanish when he tried to get closer. They were unnerved enough that they cut their hike short and were heading home. I decided to keep this to myself, but inside, my gut was clenched in terror. That second night was worse. The storm the ranger warned about had rolled in, unleashing torrential rain. Lightning flashed, illuminating the forest in these horrible bursts of white light. Each time it flickered, I thought I saw that thing standing a little nearer. At one point, I was almost certain that thing was perched on a branch, peering down like some twisted gargoyle. My phone battery had drained unexpectedly earlier in the evening. It was at 80% when I'd checked at dinner. So, I couldn't call for help, or even take a picture. It kept dropping to 0 no matter what I did. It was almost like an electrical anomaly was happening around me. Eventually, I grabbed my emergency flashlight and started sprinting down the trail in a blind panic. My plan was just to get back to my car, drive to the nearest motel, and figure out if I'd lost my mind. About a mile into the trek, I heard that hum behind me, accompanied by fleeting glances of that lanky figure weaving among the trees. There were points I thought I saw it in multiple places at once, or maybe it just moved impossibly fast. I tripped at least twice, slamming my knees onto gravel and pine needles. The last time I fell, I braced myself for the worst. I was sure this thing was right behind me. That's when I saw 2 faint beams of light flashlights from a search party, or maybe a group of rangers. They started calling out, asking if anyone was there. Their voices were muffled by the rain. As soon as those lights hit me, I felt a heavy tension lift, and the presence behind me seemed to vanish. They helped me hobble the last quarter mile to the parking area. One of them mentioned they'd been alerted by a pair of day hikers, the brother and sister, who reported seeing a distressed camper who might be in trouble. I was breathing so hard I could barely choke out a "thank you." When I tried to explain what I'd seen, they just nodded politely, like they'd heard every bizarre story under the sun. And that was the strangest part. One of the rangers said they'd had multiple calls about odd sightings in the forest. This past month, pale figures, strange vocalizations, missing time episodes. They didn't confirm or deny anything. They simply looked at each other with these grim expressions and walked me to my car. I wish I could tell you that's the end of the story. But ever since I came home, I've been plagued by nightmares. Sometimes I see that gaunt shape looming outside my bedroom window when I close my eyes. And my nephew swears he heard some weird, static-laced breathing over the line when I tried to call him about a week after the incident. What do you even call something like that? A wendigo, a skinwalker, a crawler, an interdimensional being? All I know is I've never been so frightened, and I'm not the only one. When I tried looking up local news reports, I found odd references to campers going missing or complaining of strange hums at night. One hiker's note on a trail website mentioned something that looks like a deer but moves like a human, though I didn't find details beyond that vague mention. I can't make any sense of it, and the rescue team wouldn't elaborate. The local ranger station gave me a prepared statement about how wildlife can exhibit unusual behaviors under environmental stress. But this was no bear, no wolf, no normal creature. Maybe there's someone out there who's seen the same thing and can confirm I'm not losing my mind. So what are we to make of this nighttime stalker of the Pacific Northwest? A tall tale spun from the shadows of towering pines, or a genuine brush with something beyond our understanding? Perhaps we'll never know. The next account you're about to hear is not for the faint of heart. This email arrived with all the dread and desperation of someone who truly believed they'd seen something beyond the bounds of normal. Something that defies explanation. So settle in, because what follows is a first-hand report of a chilling encounter deep in the Pennsylvania wilderness. I'm still shaking as I type this. I've gone over it 100 times in my head, and I can't make sense of it. My name is Derek, though some friends call me Deke, and I just got back from what was supposed to be a peaceful weekend in the Allegheny National Forest in northwestern Pennsylvania. I'd planned on a simple 2-night camping trip. The biggest threats I'd considered were black bears, maybe a rabid raccoon if I was really unlucky. But that was before I realized something else was out there, stalking me in the dark. I headed in via the Marianville side, off Route 66. I'd pitched my tent at a somewhat secluded spot near the Minister Creek area. Some of you might know it's known for nice rock formations and old-growth hemlocks. It was chilly, but not too bad during the day, maybe in the low 40s, but the nights dropped to near freezing. Nothing unusual at first. I did notice an odd silence around dusk, like the forest just went dead quiet. But I shrugged it off, thinking maybe the cold weather had already driven most of the wildlife into deeper cover. I swear the only reason I decided to share this with the YouTube channel crowd is because of how indescribably terrifying it got on the second night. The first night, I heard some weird rustling around 2 a.m. That's not unusual. Squirrels, raccoons, deer, all sorts of critters are active at night. But something about this rustling was heavier, more deliberate. Sounded like it was pacing around the perimeter of my sight. I kept my flashlight within reach and tried to sleep, but it was impossible. At dawn, I poked around and found footprints in the mud about 50 feet from my tent. They were large and oddly shaped, almost like a dog's paw print, but elongated. Not to mention, they sank deeper into the ground than a normal animal track would. I snapped a couple of photos on my phone, no idea if they turned out clearly, but I'm pretty sure they were bigger than my hand spread out. I told myself it could be a big coyote, or maybe a stray dog with some unusual gait, but I was rattled. The last time I saw prints that big was, well, never. I tried to calm down, spent the day hiking a loop trail near the creek. Around 3 p.m., I ran into another hiker, older guy wearing a battered camo jacket, who said he'd seen something weird out in the trees. He didn't go into detail, just mumbled something about they come out when it's cold, and left me standing there scratching my head. By then, the overcast skies were rolling in, and I knew I had to start heading back before dark. I didn't see anyone else on the trail. That second night, this is when everything went sideways. It was probably close to midnight. My campfire had burned down to embers, and I was lying in my sleeping bag trying to drift off. That's when I heard a low growl, like it was right outside my tent wall. It was so close I could practically feel the vibration in my chest. Before I even had a chance to react, I heard heavy footsteps circling around again, only this time they sounded like they were on 2 legs, not 4. I sat there, paralyzed, wondering if maybe a person was messing with me. But then I heard that growl again, deeper, unnatural, not like anything a normal human throat could produce. I grabbed my flashlight, unzipped the tent a couple of inches, and tried to look out. I caught the reflection of 2 eyes in the dark. They were high off the ground, almost at the level of my shoulders when I stand up, and they glowed this odd yellowish green. I must have gasped or made some noise because it darted back behind a tree. I stepped out of the tent fully, and that's when I saw it. A silhouette, taller than me, I'm 6'1", with a canine-like head and long arms. It let out a snarl that sounded like a mix of a dog's bark and a human scream. I don't know how else to describe it. Panic took over. I grabbed the bear spray I keep in my pack and started yelling anything I could think of, hoping to scare it off. It didn't run away, though. It just kept pacing, circling around the faint glow of my dying campfire. The scariest moment was when it lunged closer and I could see the outline of its body, muscular but lean, with a weird hunched posture. My flashlight flickered, and I swear it looked like it was grinning. That's the image I can't get out of my head. I bolted, left half my gear behind, just took my keys, phone, and the bear spray. I tore down the trail, practically blind. You know how in the forest at night, especially in late fall, everything is a tangle of branches and shadows. I tripped every few yards. I could hear this thing chasing me. Its footsteps were heavy, and occasionally I'd hear that growl again, or a snarl that made every hair on my neck stand on end. I have no idea how long I ran. The next thing I remember is stumbling onto Forest Road 131, the gravel road that leads back toward the main highway, and nearly collapsing. A pickup truck eventually came by, an older woman driving who looked as shocked as I was. She helped me into her cab and asked what the heck happened to me. I must have looked insane, covered in dirt and pine needles, panting like a hunted animal. She kept asking if I was hurt, or if someone attacked me, but all I could say was that there was something out there. She offered to drive me straight to the state police barracks near Marianville. I was in such a daze I just nodded. The police took my statement, but I'm sure they thought I was either delirious or lying. They asked if I was under the influence of anything, or if maybe I'd seen a bear or a large wolf. I tried to explain the two-legged posture, the snarling that sounded almost human, but they just gave me that blank, polite stare. One trooper suggested maybe I'd had a run-in with a rabid coyote or a black bear with a deformity, but I could tell none of them truly believed me. They took a report, though, and told me if I wanted to go back for my gear, they'd send an officer with me in the morning. When morning came, we drove out, me and a young officer who seemed more curious than dismissive. We found my campsite torn up, my tent shredded, my cooler knocked over, and fresh prints in the mud. The officer crouched down, measured one of the prints with a tape measure. He looked pale. He said he wasn't sure what could have done that. He took a few photos with his phone. Then he told me he needed to call the station. More officers arrived, including some sort of wildlife specialist. They taped off the area, and I wasn't allowed to stick around. They didn't let me collect anything except my phone charger and a few personal items that were scattered. Everything else was now part of an ongoing investigation, they said. I found out later from a local who runs a small diner just north of Marianville that there have been sightings like this going back decades. Hunters whisper about a dogman roaming these woods. Some call it a cryptid, others call it a shapeshifter. He told me he'd seen plaster casts of footprints that look eerily similar to the ones I found, and that I'm lucky I made it out in one piece. He claimed that a buddy of his spotted something like it years ago near Kinzua Dam, but folks just chalked it up to tall tales. Police can't explain it, or won't. Locals have their theories. Most seem reluctant to talk openly unless they trust you. I've been having nightmares every night since it happened, replaying the moment those glowing eyes locked with mine. I still can't shake the feeling that if that pickup truck hadn't come along when it did, I might have ended up a statistic. Whatever that thing was, it's still out there, prowling the forests of Pennsylvania. And the worst part is, I doubt this is the last time it'll make its presence known. So there you have it, another nocturnal encounter in the thick of the Alleghenies, a monstrous figure that defies zoological explanation, a frantic escape into the darkness, and a set of footprints that even local law enforcement can't quite place. The question remains, Was it a glimpse into a hidden realm of folklore and cryptids, or simply the fevered imagination of a rattled camper lost in the night? Another strange encounter fades away. A trick of the mind, or something far more unsettling. That's for you to decide. Thank you so much for watching my stories. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support is what keeps this channel going.